Imagine this, a colossal 542-foot steel beast of the sea, heavily armed, fully manned, sailing directly into the pages of history. But not for some glorious battle, no. It's remembered because it simply ceased to exist. Welcome to this explainer on the absolute greatest non-combat loss of life in the history of the United States Navy. Today we're unpacking a maritime mystery that has completely baffled experts for over a century, the impossible vanishing of the USS Cyclops. 306. That is the exact number of souls. We're talking sailors, officers, and passengers who were on board this massive vessel on March 4th, 1918. Every single one of them vanished without a trace. Fathers, sons, seasoned naval veterans, all just swallowed by the ocean. And keep in mind, this was during an era where ships were already equipped with wireless SOS technology. Okay, let's dive into this, because here is the eerie reality that makes this case so uniquely terrifying. Zero. Despite one of the most massive search operations in U.S. naval history, literally dozens of ships and aircraft scouring the Atlantic, absolutely zero pieces of wreckage were ever found. No life preservers, no oil slicks, no floating debris whatsoever, and no bodies. Just a total, unnerving silence. Section 1. The impossible vanishing, the Navy's greatest mystery. So, how does a massive steel ship just get erased from existence? It's a question that has haunted the Navy for over a century. And to really grasp the scale of this mystery, you have to understand we aren't talking about some tiny fishing boat that could easily slip beneath the waves unnoticed. The USS Cyclops was a Proteus-class collier. It displaced over 19,000 tons and stretched 542 feet long. It was an absolute behemoth, perfectly designed to haul massive quantities of fuel across the globe for American forces during World War I. To have a vessel of this magnitude leave absolutely no footprint behind on the ocean's surface, it completely defies logic. Honestly, it's like a 54-story building just being plucked from a city skyline overnight. Section 2. The doomed final voyage. Red flags in the water. To understand how this happened, we've got to look at the timeline of its 1918 journey. And let me tell you, this voyage was plagued with terrifying omens right from the very start. Let's walk through those final days. The Cyclops departed Rio de Janeiro in mid-February, bound for Baltimore, Maryland. But on March 3rd, the ship made a highly unusual, completely unscheduled stop in Barbados. The captain decided to buy extra supplies and coal, which totally puzzled the port authorities since the ship already had plenty on board. Less than 24 hours later, it departed into the Atlantic, sent out a totally routine weather fair message, and then, well, it completely missed its scheduled arrival in Baltimore on March 13th. Now, the crucial point here is what was actually in the ship's belly. The Cyclops was intended to carry about 8,000 tons of coal, but on this trip, it was loaded with 11,000 tons of manganese ore, which was absolutely vital for wartime steel and munitions. But here's the thing. Manganese ore is incredibly dense. Actually, scratch that, it's practically a completely different species of cargo compared to coal. It's so heavy that port officials in Barbados specifically noted the Cyclops was sitting dangerously low in the water, submerged well past its safe plimsoll mark. And you know, the overloading was really just the tip of the iceberg when we look at the compounding logistical failures. The ship had a cracked starboard engine cylinder, meaning this 19,000-ton Titan was practically limping across the open ocean on just one working engine. Combine that severely compromised power with the dangerously dense cargo, that bizarre stop in Barbados, and a crew entirely inexperienced in handling shifting manganese ore, yeah, you've got a ticking time bomb. Section 3. The eccentric Captain Worley. A recipe for disaster. Now, a struggling ship can sometimes be saved by a brilliant commander. Unfortunately for the Cyclops, they had the exact opposite. Let's talk about the deeply eccentric, highly controversial Captain George W. Worley. We actually have a first-hand account from Conrad Nervik. He was an officer who, incredibly fortunately, transferred off the ship in Brazil right before its final run. He described Worley as a gruff, eccentric salt of the old school, an indifferent seaman, and a poor, overly cautious navigator. Morale on the Cyclops was at absolute rock bottom. The crew thoroughly disliked and, more importantly, distrusted their captain. And it's pretty easy to see why. Worley was known to walk the night deck wearing literally nothing but long woolen underwear and a derby hat. He had violently chased a crew member around the ship with a pistol, but his absolute most fatal mistake happened following a petty argument when Worley confined his executive officer to his quarters. This guy was the only officer on board with extensive experience in properly loading and securing heavy manganese ore. Without him, the junior officers basically just dumped this incredibly dense cargo right into the center holds, creating a deadly pendulum effect inside the ship. Section 4. Monsters, Myths, and U-boats. The Bermuda Triangle. Because the Cyclops vanished on a route slicing straight through that infamous region stretching between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, this mystery has obviously been a magnet for wild speculation. Naturally, people looked for extraordinary answers. Was it a German U-boat ambush during the war? Well, we know from meticulously kept German naval records checked after the war that no U-boats were even in that sector and absolutely none claimed the sinking. What about a mutiny? Because of the hated captain? There has literally never been a successful mutiny in U.S. Navy history. And even if there was, mutineers don't magically make a 542-foot ship vanish without a single piece of debris. And of course, the Bermuda Triangle folklore brings us the usual suspects: alien abductions, time warps, and sea monsters, which, hey, great for Hollywood blockbusters, but they hold zero scientific weight. So, we have to ask the ultimate question. What actually happened to a 542-foot behemoth? If we completely strip away the paranormal and the wartime paranoia, what chilling scientific reality are we actually left with? Section 5. The Sister Ship's Curse. A chilling pattern. To find the answer, we actually have to look outside the Cyclops itself, because as tragic as this disappearance was, it wasn't an isolated incident. You see, the USS Cyclops had two nearly identical sister ships built by the exact same company, the USS Proteus and the USS Nereus. And get this, both of these identical colliers vanished in the exact same Caribbean region decades later, in 1941. And notice their cargo? Bauxite ore. All three sister ships vanished without a trace while carrying dangerously heavy, incredibly dense metallic ore. This wasn't some supernatural curse. This was a fatal, repeating engineering flaw. Section 6, the terrifying scientific truth. The forensic autopsy. And this brilliantly illustrates how modern technology finally cracked the case. Recently, a team of maritime forensic experts used modern software, historical barometric logs, and digital twins to conduct a forensic autopsy on the ship's final moments. This simulation proved that the Cyclops sailed directly into a powerful, completely unforecasted storm system, and within those specific storms lurk rogue waves. These are abnormally large, entirely unpredictable walls of water that can reach up to 100 feet high, suddenly forming to strike vessels. These were once considered just wild sailors' myths, but modern satellite data proves they are very real and very, very deadly. By loading the original blueprints and weather data into the simulation, researchers discovered a catastrophic 90-second chain reaction. First, old shipyard logs showed the Cyclops already had severe corrosion and metal fatigue along its keel. Second, then improperly loaded, massive 11,000 tons of manganese ore concentrated all the weight right in the ship's center. Third, as the ship limped along on one engine, it was lifted at the bow and stern by massive rogue waves, leaving that ultra-heavy middle suspended in thin air. And fourth, the immense downward force was simply too much. The hull snapped in half instantly. Sunk in under 90 seconds, literally a minute and a half. When that keel snapped, thousands of tons of heavy metallic ore poured into the breach, dragging both halves of the massive ship underwater almost instantly. This violently rapid collapse perfectly explains the silence. There was absolutely no time to launch a lifeboat. There was zero time for the wireless operator to tap out an SOS. The ship, the crew, everything on board was sucked down into the dark abyss before anyone could even comprehend what was happening. The American poet Carl Sandburg famously wrote about this tragedy, penning the lines, "The sea keeps its secrets and the Cyclops sleeps in depths unknown." It's a hauntingly beautiful reflection on a pretty grim reality. Because even though modern forensic science has finally explained exactly how the ship sank, the wreckage itself is still down there. Hidden in deep Atlantic trenches that drop thousands of feet down, it's literally like searching for a needle on the dark side of the moon. Which leaves us with this final, genuinely chilling thought to ponder. What other terrifying mysteries are still waiting to be found in the darkest, unexplored trenches of our oceans? The Cyclops reminds us that no matter how massive our steel creations are, the ocean is an ancient, unpredictable, and infinitely powerful force. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep your curiosity sharp.